Aloha kako. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about user-defined exceptions. So up until now, we've been doing things like using the exception class. The exception class, the base class, is good in that it can catch all of the different types of exceptions that occur. The problem is sometimes you want to be able to differentiate between what type of exceptions that you're catching here. Sometimes you might be catching things that you don't intend to catch. So when we look at the participation activity here, we've got a function here called a method called get density scanner, the get density. And get density, it's going to throw an exception, a generic exception, and it has up here the throw exception. So this is going to be handled in code at the next level up in main. So when we get something like a problem where we have a not a number situation, this is what we're expecting. We're expecting that in a not a number situation, we're going to be kicking up and handling the exception at uh, the main level. So at the main level, we'd handle the exception here, expecting there was a non-number. But what happens if somebody puts in like an input mismatch exception? So that's the problem. If you were to, let's go ahead and run this. So it's going to go down here. Programmer intended for the catch block to only catch the exception explicitly thrown if the calculation resulted in a non-number situation. But as we find out next, we go in here, we're going to go ahead and scan, we're going to get the value. Let's say they put in the word 7 instead of the number 7. That's an input mismatch type. But because we're throwing exception here, that will be handled. So we're going to throw the exception. It'll be handled up here at the catch. And if this was code that was only intended to handle not a number, we would have a problem here. So sometimes using this generic exception can run into little problems like this. So we handle this through using user-defined exceptions. So on the way down here, you'll see we have some participation activities. They're going to want you to look at different inputs and such for the code up here. Go ahead and plug those in, try to understand how the behavior works. So user-defined exception types. This is good because a programmer can define a custom exception type by extending the exception class. So when we're extending the exception class, it looks like the following. We have our public class. In this example, it's not a number exception. So we're going to extend. This is the key words that you're looking for here. Extends exception. And then we have our constructor in here, the public not a number exception. And then we're going to call on these. We're going to call on the super exceptions constructor, and we're going to send it the message not a number exception here. So we'll go ahead and start the little explanation here. So user-defined exception type extends the exception class. Yay. And then the constructor passes a fixed exception message string to the exception class's constructor. That's going on here. So it's that simple to do. We can go down and look at some of the participation activities here. And this is just asking you to construct your own using I guess, the template that you see up here. So go ahead and answer the questions in here, fill in the blanks for the different parts. And then we get into an example of a density calculator with multiple user-defined exception types. So the exception types, they've got defined in different files. They've got invalid negative input exception. So if a number is put in that's negative, it should flag this. And you've got the not a number exception that we kind of experienced up above. That was the one that we wanted to be catching, but it was catching the generic input mismatch. So we use these two. We set up these two user-defined exceptions. And then in our density calculator, you'll see that we have the method get positive value. And in here, we're going to be asking it for, well, actually in get positive value. Yeah, so we're going to print enter the whatever the type is. So we're going to go down here. We're going to look, we're going to see if that input value is less than 0. If it is, we're going to throw the invalid negative input exception from up here. And when we go to throw that, it's going to be handled in the calling code. So if we want to see who is calling this, just do a quick look here. So it's called over here. So inside get density, this is where it's going to happen. But look, you'll notice that we have the throw invalid negative exception here. We're throwing it here. So we're not handling it within the the method here. We're handling it at the calling level, but at the calling level, you see that we don't handle it. We're just throwing the same up as well as our not a number exception. So when we call this, we get a value back. If it flags as having a problem, it's going to bubble up, and then this will throw it up to the main level here. But in here, if it is a valid number, if we do have valid numbers that we get, but then we do a calculation on, let's say those numbers come back as 0, then we're going to throw a not a number exception because 0 divided by 0 is considered not a number when you're dealing with doubles. So that error will be, or that exception will be thrown, and that will go up here to the top level. And then in the top level, you've got a catch right here for the invalid negative input exception, our bespoke, user-defined exception that we created. It would print out here. And then for the separate not a number exception, we would handle it right here. So this is how you use user-defined the user-defined exceptions. So you can go through here and learn how to use it, just kind of get a feel for it. And then later on, it's going to have you doing some of your own. So you'll be working with user-defined exception types with methods. And here, it'll have you fill in like what other variable do you need to set up here, and then what kind of operations you need to do here for the given method name. So that's relatively easy. Then you're going to get into catching user-defined exception types. So here, once again, you need to figure out what the different parts are that it's asking for, read your instructions, go to it. And then the challenge we get into a little bit more. So you're going to have to complete some code here. It's not very complex, but you just need to do this for 3 different sections. So it tells you pretty much what you need to do here. Start a clause with throw, create a new object using new, call the input out of range exception constructor with message such and such as the argument. So yeah, that pretty much gives you everything that you need to be typing in here. So yep. So anyways, it's pretty easy. Again, you go to start, then you type in, I'll just give you a little starter here. So you go and look at it. So, okay, if that condition exists, then we're going to throw a new, and because I don't want to get an error here because of a typo, I'm going to go ahead and copy it. And we're going to send that with the message. Error the, there we go. It's invalid. We'll just copy and paste here. We put that in there, and we don't want to forget our semicolon. So we've got that in there. And then if we were to do this, we just hit check, and our checker will run and tell us that we got everything wrong. I mean, right down here. So yeah, everything passes. Then you just hit next level and you go to the next one. So just go through it. This is pretty simple. It's just asking you, it's giving you very explicit instructions on what to do up here, but you go through the whole process of creating these, user-defined exceptions. So that's the topic of this video. Again, to recap, we're talking about why we would not want to use the exception class because it's generic and it can catch things that we don't want to necessarily catch or that we're not intending to catch. We want to use a user-defined one that's more specific to our goals, and we have the ability to create that using by creating an extension or creating a user-defined exception type that extends exception. So the way to do that is through creating a method here, or not a method, actually, this would be a class. We would create a class. You'll usually separate this into a different file, and then you'll incorporate that into your other code. And if you're bubbling this up, you would, you just remember if you're doing multiple different ones, you'd have different code files for each one. And then you would, in your code, when you're calling things, remember that you're going to be, in your method, you're going to be throwing that specialized exception type. And if you're bubbling it up to different levels, remember at that level too that you're not going to handle the exception there. You're going to have to also bubble that up and throw it again so that it's caught at the higher level, the calling levels. So that's it. If you have any questions on this material, feel free to reach out. This is pretty straightforward, simple. If you do have any questions, just reach out to me and I'll be happy to help. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Aloha.